wiped it off your passports. What a relief to find it in real life as handsome and as solid as ever behind its high stone walls. Who would want to efface the images of your history from your passports? See, who would want to replace the pictures that tell your story with generic shapes and patterns that could have come from anywhere? Canadians are not a random set of individuals who happen to qualify for the same passport. Canadians are a nation. And not just any nation. A nation that is a byword for decency and dependability and democracy and determination. A nation bound together by shared stories, shared dreams. Look, if it were only the passports, I wouldn't have mentioned it. But somehow that change seems symbolic of what has been happening here these past 8 years. In 2015, Trudeau declared, "There's no core identity, no mainstream in Canada." What an extraordinary thing to say. It's as though he's embarrassed about the things that make this country distinctive. No, scratch that. As though he's embarrassed about the things that make this country great. It's almost as though he would rather have a bland, woke, decaffeinated, vegan, alcohol-free, though not drugs-free, high-tax, high-spend, UN-compliant, social democratic blancmange. So this is the guy who says in the New York Times, like where else obviously in the New York Times, this is the guy who says in the New York Times, Canada is post-national. Just think for a second about what that means, right? Not a nation at all. A government with some citizens attached. But my friends, the very real nation of Canada has not gone away. The nation shaped by pioneers who settled empty snowscapes fueled only by dreams of liberty. The nation that attracted millions of people here from every continent, from every archipelago, because they wanted the space to be themselves. The nation whose leaders used to think of themselves as servants and not as rulers. Talking of which, do you know where Justin Trudeau is this weekend? That's right. He's just flown into New Delhi for the G20 summit. Justin Trudeau, India. What could possibly go wrong? The G20, 19 other governments looking to him to learn what not to do, keen to avoid his mistakes. Because of the 20 heads of government there, he is the one who inherited a golden economic legacy that the other 19 could only have dreamt of. He's the guy who won the lottery and then threw away the ticket. Who could have had a richer bequest than the one left behind by Stephen Harper? A budget surplus. Falling taxes, falling crime, secure borders, sound money, he had it all, and look at what he did. You know, there's a structural unfairness, isn't there, in politics? When times are good, people feel they can afford to let go. They can afford to vote for these high-spending, high-taxing parties, and those parties then empty the nation's coffers, exhaust its credit, and that's when they send for the Conservatives to clean up the mess. And that's why our parties, yours and mine, end up doing all the heavy lifting. So roll up your sleeves, my friend, because it isn't long to wait now. I was very honoured to know Stephen Harper, to get to know him when he was Prime Minister. He told me, a fixed rule of politics is that no leader anywhere, of any party, ever approves of his successor. So I am probably the only person in this expansive hall today who can say this, but I count it as one of my proudest boasts to be on good terms with all of your recent leaders. With Stephen himself, of course, with the great Andrew Scheer, with Erin O'Toole, and with Pierre. Now, it's worth remembering that under your last two leaders, at the last two elections, you did in fact win, right, in the sense of getting more votes than any of your rival parties. translate into a plurality of seats. But let's be honest about this. It was always going to be difficult to win an election against a government that was still burning its way through that massive surplus that it had inherited from the Tories. Right? If you're lucky enough to start with strong growth rates and a balanced budget and healthy revenues and zero borrowing, you can get away with a lot before reality kicks in. You can be a bit like Wile E. Coyote when he goes off the edge of the cliff. You know, your feet are still whirring in place, but eventually, reality reasserts itself, and that is the moment that Canada has reached now. So, whom do we trust to fix it? Do we trust the guy who caused the problem in the first place? The guy whose response, just as the inflationary crisis was taking off, was to declare, I don't really think about monetary policy? Or the guy who back in May 2020 was almost alone in predicting what has in fact happened since? My friends, Pierre Poilievre is no ordinary politician. He is a man of exceptional integrity, exceptional intelligence, exceptional insight, and exceptional instinct. He made the right calls. Even back during those first few panicky weeks of the pandemic, he saw the cost of living crisis coming. He used his time on the Finance Committee to warn about prices rising. And you know what? He was poo-pooed by everyone, by the central bank governor, by the finance minister, by the CBC, by every clever dick who said that the real problem in Canada was going to be prices falling. Well, Pierre got the diagnosis right. He's got the prescription right. He has got a plan to fix things. He's got a plan to get back to a society where if you do the right thing and you get a decent job, you end up with a decent paycheck and a comfortable home. Now, actually, you know what? I'm going to go further. Don't tell any of my Tory colleagues at home that I said this, but you know what? I would say, here we go. Pierre Poilievre is currently the most impressive centre-right politician in the world. Look at what your leader has already done. Look at the way he's transformed the demographics of this party. Look at the way he has brought in hundreds of thousands of young members. Look at the way he is giving a voice to the angry and defrauded young in this country, the people who have been so badly treated since the lockdown, since they were confined at home for a disease that was of no threat to them, and have come out and been presented with a bill for the whole damn thing. Look at the way in which he is appealing to the working people in this country, the people who say little but do much. All of that he has achieved as leader of the opposition. Just imagine what he's going to be like as Prime Minister. And what about Justin Trudeau? Well, Trudeau is a guy who began with every possible advantage. Best schools, financial security, famous name, every door open to him. But sadly, he turned out to be a fair-weather Prime Minister, ill-suited to the tough times. Now look, I'm sure he's a lovely guy. He's certainly a very good-looking guy. It makes me wonder why he has that thing about putting on all the makeup all the time, but we'll leave that to one side. In fact, I read there's a First Nations tribe near Calgary that has given him an Aboriginal name. Apparently, he's called Gumistihi, which I read translates as the one who keeps trying, right? Note the one who keeps trying, right? Not the one who keeps succeeding, not even the one who has succeeded once or twice. Or maybe I've got that translation wrong. Maybe he's the one who keeps flying. That would be a very appropriate name, you know. I sometimes think that every airport in Canada should be called Trudeau, not just the one at Montreal. It's been 10 years now since my absolutely favourite Canadian YouTube clip, It's the one I'm sure you've seen, where Chrystia Freeland is a candidate for the first time. She's going into politics in 2030. And she says, I've written this down because it's just so perfect. She says, it's increasingly the case that your job prospects are correlated not with how hard you work, not with how well you do in school, but with the job your father had, and that's not Canada. And then she looks up with this kind of horrified expression and she realizes that the man sitting next to her is Justin Trudeau. It's a lovely moment. I mean, she was onto something, wasn't she, right? The job your father had, damn right, Chrystia, that is not Canada. You knew it then, and all of us know it now. Right? Now, by the way, a lot of people say it's, that Trudeau isn't affected by these price rises, right? He can be relaxed about inflation because he's got this trust fund, he's got all these assets and stuff. I think that is really unfair. Justin Trudeau now has to work 20% harder not to think about monetary policy than he used to. But look at the difference. Look at the contrast. Justin Trudeau, a man from a privileged background who has coasted through life. Pierre Poilievre, a guy from an ordinary background with extraordinary abilities. The kid who delivered newspapers in suburban Calgary, who has now turned into an economic analyst with the knowledge, the grit, the determination to get Canada back on track. And Pierre wants to release this country's awesome wealth. Has any land been blessed with greater natural resources than this? Your chromite was born in the cooling of magma 2 billion years ago. Your vast stores of natural gas were formed from decaying plants so ancient that in many cases we have no names for them. Your lithium was made in the white furnace of dying stars. Your nickel hurtled to Ontario in flaming meteors. And another meteor created the great reservoir at Manicouagan. But it was Canadian genius that created the Daniel Johnson Dam. And it's Canadian genius that presses all of these great resources into the service of mankind. Sorry, of people kind. And when you liberate those resources, my friends, you are doing the world a favor. When you export your energy surpluses, you are relieving other countries of having to rely on dirty energy from dirty regimes. You know how many Liberal MPs it takes to change a light bulb? None! Trudeau's made them too expensive! Right. We're still allowed light bulb jokes, right? I'm not going to be kind of Jordan Peterson for telling a joke here. One more light bulb joke. How many wokies does it take to change a light bulb? That's not appropriate or funny. But Pierre is a guy who would never dream of constraining or curtailing the wealth of this country. And he knows that the greatest wealth of Canada is not the stuff that you find under your feet. The greatest wealth is the people, and especially the people who have been neglected these past 8 years, the people who build things and dig things and drive things. Pierre knows that real leadership is not about trying to take all the decisions yourself. It's about pushing power outwards and downwards. It's about trusting people, because we all know our own circumstances better than government bureaucrats do. And you know what? Pierre passes the most basic test of all. He loves the country he aspires to lead. Not the touchy-feely Trudeauian version, but the very real nation that your friends know and admire. Toute ma vie, je me suis fait une certaine idée du Canada. Polite and peaceable, but resolute when roused. The bravest of friends, the most loyal of allies. The Canada of Vimy Ridge and Passchendaele. The Canada of Juno Beach and the Netherlands. The Canada of Papillon and Kandahar. friends, that's the nation that your intellectual elites, that your entitled classes are erasing, and not only from your passports. You know, as recently as 2020, there were 10 statues of Sir John A. Macdonald in this country. Now there are only 2. The one on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and the one in Queen's Park in Toronto. And those 2 are under constant police protection. Meanwhile, the name of the father of Confederation is being taken off street signs, off school books, off school buildings. I mean, I'm worried that the next thing is they're going to try and take it off the popular American burger chain that bears it. By the way, I think Trudeau's inflation has had an impact even there. I understand that in the Canadian franchises they are now selling a burger called a quarter ouncer. That's the cost of living crisis after 8 Liberal years. But seriously, why go after Sir John A. Macdonald? Right? The guy who sort of created this country on the vision that he had of a nation stretching from sea to sea and being a benign force in world affairs. What was his terrible crime? Was it living in the wrong century? Was it being a Tory? This is a guy who was decades ahead of his time in trying to give the vote to women, who wanted to give the vote to Indigenous people. I wonder whether there isn't something more sinister. I wonder whether, in the eyes of the woke, his real crime isn't to have created this country in the first place. So, well, let me say this as a friend from overseas. Thank God he did. You find me another country that has made the big calls consistently as well as this one had. You know, the social justice warriors, they love to talk, don't they, about telling Canada's story, warts and all. And that's fine, right? Every country has warts, every country has moments in its history that it's embarrassed about. Part of being a grown-up democracy is acknowledging the warts. But somehow, the wokies never seem to get around to the and all bit, right? And the and all bit for Canada includes some pretty darned impressive achievements. From inventing telephones and insulin to winning the 2 world wars and the Cold War, you find me another country that has done more to defend and export human rights than this one. Wasn't it wonderful to hear from General Maisonneuve? Wouldn't it be wonderful if every Canadian schoolchild heard what he had to say? The General spoke about the Royal 22nd Regiment, the famous Vandus, headquartered here in the Citadel in Quebec City. In August 1918, that regiment fought the bravest part of the Battle of Amiens, alongside soldiers from Australia, the UK, France, and the US. 8 Canadians won the Victoria Cross in that engagement. And my friends, it turned the course of the war, because for the first time in all those years of slogging trench warfare, the disciplined German army broke and ran from Canadians. And afterwards, a despairing General Ludendorff went to the Kaiser and he said, "We have reached the limits of our capacity. The war must be terminated." So, let a visitor from overseas say it. Moi aussi, je me souviens. Merci. Merci le 22e, and thank you, Canada. Quebec City is defined by her citadel, as was ancient Athens by her Acropolis. There's a very old story about Athens. It comes from the pen of the historian Herodotus 2,500 years ago. Herodotus tells us that when the Persians had razed the city, destroyed everything, the following day the Athenians climbed back up the Acropolis and were delighted to find, amid the blackened ruins, that their sacred olive tree, the heart of the city, had shot forth a new shoot. My friends, the roots had survived. Nations have deep roots. And like the sacred olive tree of the Acropolis, your roots run deep, as thick and as fibrous as the roots of your magnificent maple trees, clawing the way into the cool, dark, fertile soil of this country, nourishing the liberty that is the patrimony of every Canadian wherever your parents were born. The next time I come here, I hope that a Poilievre government will have restored the image of the citadel of Quebec to the passports. But much more than that, I hope it will have restored what that image stands for, namely a proper sense of gratitude to the nation of which, by God's grace and good fortune, you are privileged to belong. It's not long to go now, my friends. Let the Liberals and their NDP friends trash your past. Let them mock your founders. Let them scorn the freedoms that your fathers and ours fought for. But not us. We Conservatives, we have work to do. Thank you very much, my friends. God bless you. God bless Canada.